Sefer Torah. thought you were going to knock me.
Thank you for coming. I've never addressed a worldwide audience like this before, so I'm very, very nervous. The truth is, I'm going to take your permission. I'll take off the mask because there's no one nearby, and the shiur is complicated enough without the mask, so we don't want to make it even worse. So again, it is a very tricky, slippery sugi over here. I'll try to spend a little bit of time in the Marmar Komos and not go too fast, although there is a lot to cover. I do want to mention that the shiur I always say it's a schus in memory of my grandfather, Avram Eliezer Reb Tzvi. I'm also in memory of my mother, Shena Rachel Bas Avram Eliezer, and also my sister was nifter last Chol Hamoed, Rivka Bas Avram Tzvi. It should be a schus for the neshama. Okay, well, so let's start. Let's begin. There's a Gemara, beautiful little piece of Gemara on Daf Lamed Aleph and Sukkah. Hope there's enough Marmar Komos, right? And the Gemara brings a case of Tarabana, Sukkah Gezula, Mesach, Rishus Rabbim. Based on the case of a guy stole a Sukkah. We'll see what the case of Rabbi Lezer, Posel Hacham Mashir. There's a Machokas between Rabbi Lezer and Hachamim. Rabbi Lezer says it's supposed to be a Sukkah. Hachamim Machshir the Sukkah. Amar Rav Nachman. Machokas b'shetokef es chaveiro v'osiu misukasa. What's the case of the machokas of Sukkah Gezula, where somebody someone had a sukkah in his backyard, on his property. Someone else came. Let's say Reuven had the sukkah in his backyard, in his house, on his lawn, and someone else came. Shimon came and threw him out of his sukkah, out of the sukkah which belonged to Reuven. V'osiu misukasa. That's the case. That's the case of Sukkah Gezula. Rabbi Lezer says it's a apostle sukkah. Omar, you can't be yotza if it's someone else's sukkah. So Marashach, right? There's a machokas, which I'm not going to go into, but you see there's two background gemaras I put down on the sheet below. the first piece of gemara in Sukkah Daf Chaf Zayin, a couple blocks before this gemara, brings a machokas whether or not a person can be yotza with the Yinit Shalchem by a sukkah. As we know, Yinit Shalchem by the Arba Mina, that's clear. It has to be yours. If you want the esrog, the lulav to be yours, it has to be yours to be else the mitzvah. There's machlokas whether or not that applies also to sukkah. So Rabbi Yehuda says, Rabbi Lezer says that you have to have a sukkah which belongs to you. He also says some limudim and drushes over there, and therefore if it's not yours, you're not yours. So it's marashach. I karka nixeles. If karka is stolen, if karka is stealable, if you can steal karka, so sukkah gezulahi. So that means you. So over here, it's a sukkah gezula. You stole the sukkah. Whereas if you're able, if al pi halacha you're allowed to steal, you're able, not allowed, you're able to steal a sukkah. It's a sukkah gezula. You stole a sukkah, and a sukkah gezula is usher. That's the other gemara, the other back Gemara on the bottom of the page. There's a machokis if sukkah gezula. There's a machokis. Whether or not you can steal karka. Okay, kuyam leopligi that you can't steal, that you're not allowed to use. That you can't use a sukkah gezula. The machlokas we mentioned before was could you use a sukkah she'ula, right? If it has to be yours or not. But the Gemara before says that for sure you can't use a sukkah gezula. That's halacha. Drush, you can't use sukkah gezula. There's special pasuk for that a sukkah gezula you can't be yotzu with. But the shaila is, could you steal karka? So if karka is nixeles, right, which Rabbi Lezer holds, karka is nixeles. So, and Rashi explains that whatever, it's another issue over there, right? But if you hold karka is nixeles, so it comes that you stole the sukkah. You went through the other sukkah, you stole the sukkah. So Mela, so you can't, so it's possible. Elamai, Rabbi Lezer, maybe you'll tell me sukkah is not good nixeles, you can't steal a sukkah. Then sukkah shulahi. So either way, it's still a sukkah shula because it's not yours. Rabbi Lezer holds two things. That's what it comes out in a nutshell. I'm not going to go into all the back and forth, but in a nutshell, he holds number one, a sukkah could be stolen. Okay? Mela, so if your sukkah is stolen, so a sukkah zula is definitely possible. Even if it wouldn't be true, in Israel you could not steal a sukkah. So sukkah shula, according to Rabbi Lezer, is also possible. That's Rabbi Lezer. So no matter what Marashach he says, it's a sukkah that's possible in this case. Because if you stole the sukkah or you borrowed the sukkah, doesn't make a difference, it's sukkah b'sukkah. Rabban argues, say no, they hold a person could be yotzer with a sukkah shula. It's not yours, you're still yotzer with the mitzvah of sukkah. And they also hold two things. Number one, if it's not yours, it's not a problem. Number two, you can't steal karka. So for Yisrael, you could steal karka. They agree that sukkah gezula is usher. You can't use sukkah gezula. But my see, karka is one item you can't steal. You can steal metaltalin, but you can't steal karka. The sukkah shulahi. So it's not. So karka is not exiled. So it's not a sukkah gezula. And instead, it's sukkah shula. It's a sukkah which is borrowed. And therefore, you could be yotzer with this sukkah. Why? Because it's not sukkah gezula. If Yisrael would be a sukkah gezula, then if not, that would mean it's no good. But it's not gezula because you can't steal karka. So you can't steal this sukkah. So it comes out, you just took it. It's by you. But it's by you as a borrowed item, so to speak, or whatever it's by you, but it's just borrowed. It's not. You never stole it. It doesn't have the psul of sukkah gezula. Therefore, it's kosher sukkah. Avo. So that's where the machokas is. Machokas, whether or not it's kosher or puzzle, is in the case of where you went to someone's house, someone's backyard, you stole it, threw them out, and you used the sukkah. So according to Rabbi Lezer, that's a sukkah gezula, because you could steal karka. So sukkah which is on karka, sukkah which is karka, we'll see what that means. You could steal. And Chacham hold, no, it's not a problem, because it's not a sukkah gezula, you can't steal karka. Let me just, before I get to the next one, the first Rashi over there, machokas, where it says important, and that's the first arrow. Rashi machokas, right? When the Gemara brings what the machokas in the case where he went into someone's backyard, threw him out of his sukkah. Had the pasuk of the Lezer comes to talk about chaveiro b'chazaka. He threw him out. So tzio misukasav nuya b'garko shachaver shal nigzal. Right, belonged to Reuben, the first, the nigzal, not the gatzman. V'chal mekubel karka harei karka. So Rashi seems to be saying that over here the sukkah is considered like karka. It's mekubel karka. So it's karka dummy. And therefore we have this whole issue. It's basically Gemara is saying that this issue revolves around, is a sukkah stealable or not? Is karka stealable? Why does it revolve around that? Because karka, as Rashi says, mechubal karka, it's considered like karka, and therefore, since halacha, the Gemara says, we paskin contra chachamim, a sukkah, a karka is not stealable, and if it's not stealable, so it comes out that this sukkah is not a sukkah zula, because it's mechubal karka. This has hilchas karka. Sounds like almost like exeris akasa, right? That as long, I don't care about the Messias, but something which mechubal karka is karka, and all karka is not stealable. According to Hacham, Abelaz holds it's possible because it is stealable. There's a machokus, is it sukkah gasol or not? Kuyamo pigi, that mechubal karka is like karka, but what happens by karka? The Hacham say it's not stealable. It's not a sukkah gzula, and the Rabbi says no, it's sukkah gzula because even though it's karka, it still is stealable. That's the machokas. It's clear about saying, right? I know it's a little complicated, but I'm trying to make it cut to the chase. Then the Gemara says, but kuyam mopliyam v'gazal eitzim. If a person stole eitzim, v'sikach bohen. Someone stole eitzim. He stole the wood. He built the sukkah, but he stole someone else's wood, and he was masacha with those eitzim. The rehakol ein lo el demei eitzim. In that situation, since he stole raw material, stole wood, and he made a sukkah. So Rashi explains that he was kona the eitzim, either for two reasons. Number one, either because there's a Shina Hashem. He took the eitzim, made them into a sukkah. So before it was called wood, 2x4s, what everyone called, now it's called a sukkah. Number one, Shina Hashem. And beside that, Rashi is also, there's Takanas Meirish, Takanas Hashavim, Rabbanim Masakein, that if someone steals something and builds it into a house, puts it into a house, halacha is, you don't have to return it, it's yours. You have to return the money instead, but you count it. But you count it. Why? Because they're masakin. Otherwise, people, a person bought it, stole it, put it into his house, he'll take the whole house down. You can't do that. It's going to discourage returning exeter. So Rabban said, keep it. Don't worry about it. It's yours now. And just give them the money back. So therefore, no matter for two reasons, Rashi says, the Gemara is saying, according to Rashi, that therefore you don't. In that case, you kona the thing, you kona the sukkah, so it's not a sukkah gzula, kona anybody. Even if you could steal karka, but Lamai says a step past that, you were kona it, it's yours now. Now, sukkah gzula means you stole it, there was kinyan, there's chayiv onsin, you're chayiv an onsin if you stole something. So sukkah gzula means you stole the sukkah and you chayiv onsin. But if it's a step beyond that, if you kona it because either goes Shina Hashem or because it's meirish, and both those reasons, it comes out that it's yours, and therefore the sukkah you can be yotza with. It's not gazula. It's like past gazula, right? The first level, you can't steal it. Second level, you steal it. It's kinyan chesed. The third level, once you steal it and you get it's yours, either because Shina Hashem or because it's meirish. In all those cases, you're counting it's yours, and therefore it's not upon sukkah gazula. And therefore, kuyam, even Rabbi Yehuda who say sukkah gazula is possible. This is not a sukkah gazula. It's kosher because you count it. That's the Gemara both said. Okay? Very simple Gemara. Excuse me. Now, that's just the Rashi and the bottom by the other important arrow over there, which tells us about the quote. Rashi says, now Rashi by Akash, Udamrina. That which we say, the Moda Bana Begazula, right? We said before, that's one of the Gemaras before in Daf Chav Zayin Beis. The Gemara says that Kuyal Mopi, we said a Sukkah Gazula is definitely 100% pasuk, a special pasuk. It says Tasel L'cha, right? But what is the Chag Gazula Tasel L'cha? That's for you. So we mentioned Machokas is, so Rabbi says that applies even Gabi Shula, has to be Mama Shiur, and Rabbi says can't be Gazula. But for sure it can't be Gazula, special pasuk saying you can't have a Sukkah Gazula. So Rashi is bothered by the Kasha, right? If that's true, so how did Rabban the Hacham ever find what's the case of Sukkah Gazula? What's the pasuk talking about? There's no such case. Doesn't exist, right? Because if you, in case of the Gemara where you went to the guy's sukkah and you pulled them out, so you can't steal it, right? It's karka, it's not nixelis. That's the Gemara. That's what Chacham say. It's not nixelis. It's not a sukkah gazula. Elamai, you stole the guy's wood, his 2x4s, his plywood. You made a sukkah. That's also not gazula because it's yours. You count b'shin Hashem, b'shin Maisa, and takanas meirish, right? So Rashi brought by that. Well, so what's the case? What's the pasuk talking about? What case is pasuk sukkah gazula? According to Chacham. That's Rashi's kasha. Udarmina perkei yashin the modra abban the gazula. Rabbah goes to sukkah hamuchuberes lekarka. It's not talking about a case of when you steal a sukkah which is already attached to the ground. The Rabbah goes to eitzim masach lahen, like those two we just mentioned. Ela begoes to sukkah hasuya berosh hagol. Interesting case. Okay, you don't see too many sukkahs around. I don't know if I ever saw one, but a guy stole a sukkah which was built on top of a wagon, berosh hasfina, on a boat. The Yasmig Zealous. That's not Muchaber Karka. That's pure metal, right? So you go over to the sukkah, you go over to the, I guess what Rashi means, you go over to the Agola, and you do Mashiach on the go. You pull, you slap the horse on the back, and you make it go. What is it? 412? I forgot already how much. You make a Mashiach, whatever it is, right? The Mashiach. So you stole the guy's, that's the case where you stole, right? There's no Takanas Meirish, you didn't build it into a house, it came already built. There's no Takanas Agazel, not Takanas Meirish, right? Not Takanas Hashavim. And it's a metalton sukkah which you could move into, make a Mashiach on it. There's no, it's not a karka, it's not Mechubal karka, says Rashi, right? It's on a boat, it's on a wagon. So you take, that's the case in the Torah, the weird case, so to speak, where you find the case of Gzula. That's Rashi, that's the case of the pasuk is talking about. You can't return money, you have to return the item itself. The income is no, so you didn't build it. It's Gezula. That's the case of the pasuk. Interesting case. Not a very shliach case, but that's the case of the pasuk. That's what Rashi says. Okay, beautiful so far. Let's go to Tosha both sides. Let's skip to the middle of near the end of the 2/3 of Tosha. Kach Birsha Kundris. This is what Rashi said, right? Close to old Rashi. Yachinam dochak, and Rashi says Tosfos matcha. He didn't need this case. This is not this case of a Gola case and a Sfina case. And really, Rashi was dochak. It was b'chim dochak. He didn't have to say this. Why? The meeting civil chadam meitin gezula parag yashan the goes aisim v'sich b'hen shina achos Rabbi Yasahu. So if number one he says is it's not a good shino, it's chos Rabbi Yasahu, goes back. It can return back to what it was. You just take it by the sukkah, I guess he means, whatever. He doesn't. It's not a shinoi. You're not coming with a shinoi. With the rice, no kani, and you're not coming al shinoi. Umishum nakanas meirish. Hainu mirabana. V'kram mistukim midaraisa. So then what he said, listen. Says Rashi says two things. It's shinoi. The shinoi is not a good shinoi. Whatever that. Why I don't know. That's not my business. It's not a good shinoi. It's chazor b'yasa. Number one. Number two. I just nakanas meirish. That you don't, that you don't have to return, and you count the item, but that's on Rabbanan. So with the raisa, so to speak, with the raisa, this case of sukkah where you stole the wood and you made a sukkah out of it, that's the sukkah gezula. I'll tell when you count with Rabbanan, that's Rabbanan, but the raisa you're not counting. So Melo Rashi was matcha, made up his case. There was no pressure, no need. He made it up, whatever, fine, but it really wasn't necessary. That's what Toth said. Number one. Then we get to the good stuff. A few of them Rabbanan. It's even worse than that, Rashi says Toth. Even Rabbanan, the law goes, I can find a different case, a simpler case, a much more pasha case, not a crazy, weird case of a sukkah on top of a wagon or on top of on a boat. A better case. What's the case? Go. Listen carefully what I both say. Go. The Ruvain Shabana Sukkah. B'chatzero shel Shimon. Ruvain built a sukkah in Shimon's chutzner. Right? So there, the case of the Gemara is Ruvain built in Ruvain's chutzner. In Tos's case, Ruvain built it in Shimon's chutzner. He asked Shimon, by the way, I need some, can I borrow you? Can I go into can I use your field for a little while? I'll do everything myself. I'll take it apart, put it together, the whole business. It won't cost you a penny. Let me use a space for the next week, whatever, next 8 days, and the chutz starts. So he went, okay, so my host, we died or not, I don't want to get into that's a whole different gears to Shiloh, but basically Ruvain built a sukkah in the chutzner of Shimon. Midaita. What happens? But Shimon is had a change of heart, right? But Shimon, the Takaf as Ruvain, Motzio Misukasa. He went there and took Ruvain and threw him out of the sukkah. So Ruvain built his own sukkah on Shimon's land, and now he steals that sukkah. Shimon steals that sukkah. They know that Torah Shula. That's not considered Torah Shula. That would be considered a sukkah gezula. Why would that be considered a sukkah gezula? Kivan lo kaima b'shusa shel Ruvain, because that sukkah is not in Ruvain's property, rather it's in Shimon's property. V'odami or karka, the bechesa, it's not similar, karka is not nixelis. That was the shayla. How, according to Hacham, who hold that karka is not nixelis, how do you find a case of gazul? Says Tosis, the simple case over here. This is not similar to the case of a karka, which we know is because karka, why is it different? Because karka is becheskis, the becheskis habaylam omedis. Well, karka ain't karka nixelis. Says Tosis, there's a special logic. I think we'll go into later, maybe we'll see it's not like garage, not exercise the You have to analyze every case. There's a logic behind why karka is not nixelis. Let's take in front of that camera over here. Right? There's a logic why karka is not nixelis. You know why? Because karka is becheskes barel kaim. When you go onto a piece of karka, so normally you take something, metaltalin. I stole it, so I brought it into my rishus. I took it away from the nigzal, and I took it to myself. I stole it, right? Now it's in, I call my domain. I brought it into my domain. There's beside Hilchas Kinyan Gezeu, which you need a Kinyan, whether it's Mashiach or Agbo, whatever, but it's a different concept. You have to go ahead, you have to make sure you took it out of his domain, put it into your domain. Otherwise you can't steal it. Right? It says Tosis, so when it comes to karka, that you can't do by karka. Because what else by karka? You can't put it in your pocket, you walk onto the karka. So what do you do? The karka is still in the domain of the bailam. You're on the karka. Normally the davar nigzal is on you, is in your hand. You take it, you bring it over to yourself, you move it over, you bring it close, you move three tefachim, you can't move karka. So what do? How do you steal it? You want to do chazaka. Kinyan chazaka, let's say, like a house on the karka. The karka is coming with the kesef shtar chazaka, with chazaka over here. So you want to move on to the karka. Made a chazaka, very nice, but it's still by him, right? It's his name, it's his domain. It's still by him. You can't take it away from him. That's why karka is not exelis in a normal kind of case. Says Tosfot. In this case over here, I found in the Gemara's case. We'll go back to the Gemara. In the Gemara's case, where you went ahead and pushed him off, threw him out of his sukkah, which is on his karka. So it's not his karka over there. It's not nixelis because it's on his domain. The sukkah is by him. The sukkah is by him. The karka is by him. Everything's by him, right? You went into the sukkah. Sukkah is mechubar karka, let's say. Rashi says, but the sukkah is still there, still by him. What's he do? He didn't take the sukkah, put it in your pocket. You can't. It's not shayach, right? By these items, by karka and by sukkah, right? It's like karka dummy, and you can't go ahead and move it onto yourself. So it's still in his domain. So says Tosa. But in a case where, in my new case, says Tosa, where the guy built it on the Gazlin's karka. So in that case, what do you do? You walk down into the sukkah, you enter the sukkah, and you got rid of the guy, kini chazaka, let's say, okay, kini chazaka, and now it's on your domain. I mean, it was there before also, but it's on the sukkah, which normally you can't get onto your domain because it's his domain. You can't make the sukkah your domain. But if the sukkah is in my domain, like in this unique case, not so unique, but in this case, Tosis, so you can steal a sukkah. So I stole a sukkah, says Tosis. Beautiful case, right? I took the sukkah. Now it's in my domain. I made a kinyan chazaka. No problem. So therefore, says Tosis, Rashi could have said this much more normal case. It's not a crazy case of a sukkah on top of a agola or on top of a sfina, but the guy built a sukkah in my backyard, and I threw him out of the sukkah. So I stole the sukkah. It's the sukkah, is karka, and karka is not an exelis. No, that's only if you can't, because you can't take the karka and put it into your domain. But if the sukkah is in your domain, because it happens to be it's your karka, unlike the Gemara's case, it's in karka, so that kind of sukkah you could steal, and therefore that's the case of the pasuk where the Torah says tasavcha, and therefore that's the case of sukkah and exelis. That's what Tosfot says. Beautiful pshat. Beautiful new case. It would seem, I don't want to get stuck on this, but it would seem Rabbah. I think that this is the Mahogas, big Mahos Rashi and Tosfos. There's Rashi holds that Rashi just says, why it's not nigzal? Because this sukkah is mechubar karka, so karka dummy. It has hilchas karka. Karka is a dirty word, so to speak. Karka and exelis, the Torah said. It doesn't go into why, there's no why and where. Otherwise, you have to analyze why is the sukkah karka? Why is it? Why can't you steal it? You have to say Tosfos logic. He doesn't say it's sukkah is not exelis because it's mechubar karka. Rashi would probably not like Tosfos' case because Tosfos goes into the reason. It says there's no exercise cost. There's a logic behind it because you can't take it out of his domain and put it in your domain. But in the case where you could, the Torah says, so you have a case for Gezula. I don't know if we have to go into that so much now, but that's the Pashup Pshat in this Rashi and Tosfos. Okay. The goal of the Shiur is to answer up the Guna Shas Kasha. Okay? This next step we'll go to the Kasha. Guna Shas on the bottom of the page of the copy I gave you. Let's read together both sides. Toast of your master Avogosa. Kivan says, Kostos, Kivan little Kaima Beshuso Shaluvain, Kach Ains Kakin Exelis. It says by Karkas only because you can't, it's still in his domain. It's Bechesed Biomomedes. But in the case of Sukkah, which is on my property, it's by me. That's Toast says. Tamuli, I have a bomb kasha, so wonderment to me. Niman, we know the Gemara. The Gemara says, the Gemara that we quoted at the bottom of the page in the background, after Fiyazayim Beis, the Gemara says that we're Ramat three things. The Gemara says, right? Three things cannot be stolen: karka, avodim, which are hukshul karkos, and shtaros. That's the Gemara before said. That's the Gemara at the bottom of the page that I said before. I only mentioned the karka part, but the Gemara says also avodim and also shtaros. Why is avodim no good? It's hukshul karkos. Avodim we know the belt is compared to karka. That's the Gemara. That's what we always know. Says Gemara Shas Tamuli Niman. We know what the Gemara says. Yosu avodim shehukshul karkos. Avodim cannot be stolen. You know why? When you steal eved, there's no gezeira there. Because compared to karka, the Gemara says, Imke, and therefore comes out, which is us the Gemara over there, Im goza avodim lichnisan lebeisa. If someone stole an eved or avodim and he brought it into his house, ein exolim. As the Gemara is saying, right, you can't steal an eved, which means what's the normal case? How do you steal an eved? Take an eved, you capture him, you kidnap him, whatever you grab, whatever it is, right? You bring him to your house, to your shed, to your barn, wherever you put him, to your eved house, right? So he's on your property. And the Gemara is saying that avodim not stolen, which means that the shot fanor, if you brought him to your house, and let's say the river came and the hurricane came and killed them all, whatever the case was, right? And that's the Gemara over there says, that's the application of the Gemara over there, that you're not chai b'achrayus of if you stole karka, right? If a guy steals karka and then the Nor came and wiped it out, you're not mechuy because karka is not nixelis. Right? That's the Gemara says over there. Says the Gemara Shas. That would apply by Eved also. You're not chayiv because it's not nigzal. Right? Says the Gemara Hare. It comes out after ein kayam b'shus b'aylam. We see over there by an Eved, even though Eved is not existing on the reshus of the b'aylam, v'heim b'shus hagazlan. Right? You brought the karka to you. He's not in his own reshus. He's by you now. Right? Similar to our Gemara's case, similar to Tos's case, right? Where you took the sukkah and you put it, or it is, in your domain, on your karka. And there's also going to be in your karka. If it's on your karka, that'll be similar to Tos's case. But if you hoche in exelos, Bam Kasha says Rabbi Vegan, Sorach in Godel, he says, see, Sorach in Godel, right, Rabbi here? It's a big kasha. Because, you see, by Evet, the Gemara says that Evet is not, Evet is not stealable. You're not chai b'achrayus, no kinyan chai b'olzin, and therefore, because it was not stealable, I affect Rabbi Gveger, but according to Tosfos, it's stealable because Ev is only not stealable. A karka is only not stealable because you can't put it in your domain. But in the case where Tosfos brings, that you put it on your chutzner, when you put it in your land, therefore the karka is in your karka, right? The sukkah, which is karka, is on your karka. That's called in your domain, even though the sukkah itself might be not your domain. But you take a sukkah, you take karka, and you put it in your domain. That's called stealable, right? You took it out of his, you put it into your domain. That's what Tosfos says. That should apply to avodim also. Evid is the easiest thing to put in your domain. Everything you steal, you take it, bring it to your house, it's in your domain. So why can't you steal it? Zebedefun says Tosfos. See that Tosfos svara, Rabbi says Tosfos svara is ridiculous. The fact that you put it in your domain means nothing. That's Rabbi Yega's kasha. Tzarach in gadol, says Rabbi Yega. Now, I could have answered. The way to answer this very simple, very simply is that I could in theory say that, now, one more background information about both, I'm sorry I didn't mention it before, but there's machokas which are very different, Rabbi brings. There's machokas, which is machokas that I think is the Tanam Amaram, it's early people, it doesn't say who it is, but it's big people, either Tanam Amaram, whether or not a house which is tolish, with self Hebrew, right? If you have something which you attach to the ground, is that called karka dama? Is that considered like karka? There's karka is karka, it's not nixelis. The shaila is, what about something which you attach to the ground? Like a house, right? That's a big machokas. Is that considered called mechubal karka dama? In fact, Rabbi Baker asks, what Rashi says, they call mechubal karka dama, this sukkah, it's not so posh, it's only called one man yammer. What about the other man yammer? Right? The other man yammer says, called mechubal karka, is not a karka dama, because it was tolish in the beginning. The fact you attach it to the ground doesn't make it a karka. It's only something which was in the ground, I guess, like a tree or whatever, or ground itself, but something which you put onto the ground and you attach to the ground is not a karka dama. So I could have said on both sides. I could have said my first initial endeavor to answer B'Yonosha's kasha was that Tos is assuming, Tos arguing Rashi, or going the other man, let's say, Tos holds that this sukkah is not a karka dama, like metaltalin. If it's like, and therefore, so Tos only saying it's big yisod by a sukkah, which is on the ground, right, attached to the ground, but it's not kakarka, like those Tanoim or Maram, whatever they are. I'm not sure. I apologize. I couldn't find where the makor is, but that's a big machlokas. And the Mela, and therefore Tos has Yisod, so that's true. Not that Tos is limited to a case of metaltalin, but Lamaisa Tos is what Tos as far is true. But a sukkah is metaltalin, because kol mechubal karka is not a karka like those Tanoim, and therefore avodim, which is hukshul karkos, is compared to karka, right? You will not find a case of karka in the words exerts the kasser, right? That whatever the halach is by karka, you apply to avodim, right? Do I ever find a case that karka is stealable? No. Well, karka is not stealable. But Tosa said that the sukkah is stealable. Yeah, that's because the sukkah, right? You're right. The sukkah is on the ground, fine, but the sukkah is metaltalin. So the fact that a sukkah is stealable because on the domain of the gazlan, therefore you brought to your domain. That's true. But l'maisa avodim, even though you can do the same exact thing, put on the domain, but l'maisa is there's a kasha which says that it's hukshul karka. Every case of karka in the world is not stealable, right? Tos's case is not a case of karka, right? So the only case where the exception to that is because the case of sukkah, but sukkah is metaltalin. So sukkah, you have Tos's on this. You can put it onto your land, and therefore it's in your domain, and therefore the chesaron of karka. Remember, the yisod of karka is it's not your domain. That would apply to sukkah, which is metaltalin also. A sukkah which is metaltalin is not your domain because you can't put the sukkah in your pocket, right? You're walking into the sukkah like you walk onto the ground. So the sukkah is not in your domain. So Tos finds a case where it is in your domain because it's on your karka. But even that case that's not a case of a karka which is stealable. That's the case of metaltalin which is stealable because that sukkah is metaltalin. Yeah, the chapter both sides. I mean, I'll slug it up in a second, but it's a good structure, right? Potentially, I could answer his kasha by saying that since avodim is hukshul karkos, so let me find karkos, right? Let me find what's also by karka. So by karka, every case of karka is not stealable, right? Tos says a sukkah is stealable, sukkah is metaltalin, right? Homachubal karka is not a karka dam. That's what Tos talking about. And therefore, Tos is not bothered by the Girushas kasha because sukkah is metaltalin. Avodim is hukshul karkos, and therefore the fact you have an exception to the case of a non-movable big item, which you can't take out of the domain of the nigzal, except in the case where you put it onto your karka, that case is a case of metaltalin. So when avodim is hukshul karkos, all karka is not stealable. So even though you're right, you could put the evet on your domain, on your karka, but so what? The Torah is there's a kasser, evet has a lach of karka. Is karka stealable? There's no case in the world where it's stealable on both sides. There's no such case. And therefore, we answer Rabbi Vega's kasha. Getting late. Okay. The problem with this Rabbah is one simple structural problem, Rabbah. Because the Maisa, we do know, we can't ignore the fact, it's a machokas tanoam, right? Is karka, is kol mechubra karka dami. Something which is tolish, and the sof chibra, right? Which you put it onto the ground, you attach it to the ground, is that considered karka? So very nice Tosaf might be talking in the side that holds that kol mechubra karka is not a karka dami, but the Gemara Shas would have his kasha on the other man yomra. Right? The other man yomra holds that this case of Tosaf is considered, like Rashi says, mechubra karka dami. It's like karka, and if Tosas is right, Tosas Svar is right, that if you put it into your domain, that's considered that therefore you can steal it. So it comes that there is a type of karka which you can steal. You know what that is? A sukkah. If a sukkah you can steal by putting it into your domain, into your karka, so too when it comes to an eved, you take the eved, put it into your karka, it's stealable, and therefore, how can we say avadim is hukshu karkos, therefore it's not stealable? It's not true. There's two types of karka. There's karka which is not stealable, such as a piece of land, because you can't take it out of domain, such as a sukkah which is on the other guy's karka. But there's also sukkah which you could put on your domain, is stealable, and avadim is similar to that. Because avadim put on your karka. So so I might have answered the Rabbi Gerges kasha in one man yamar, but the other man yamar has to make sense also. How would Toast explain why avadim is not stealable according to the man yamar who says kol mechubra karka is a karka dami? Now, there's also another problem on both sides, which is not a problem, I think. The problem which the Kilos Yaakov says. So the Kilos Yaakov says that Bachal, what I said is Bachal not acceptable, because Tosas cannot be holding. The Kilos Yaakov says that Tosas cannot be holding that the sukkah is like metaltal. Says the Kilos Yaakov, and as he says, Tosas definitely does not hold like that shita, like that kind of shita, that kol mechubra karka is not a karka, which means like metaltalin. Because if it's like metaltalin, so what's Tosas going crazy to make a distinction between the case of Tosas and the case of karka? There's a simple difference. You know what the difference is? Because if it's metaltalin, right? If it would be metaltalin, so of course it can't be stolen. If the sukkah is metaltalin, for sure it can't be stolen, because what kinyan are making? There's no kinyan on metaltalin. Chazaka does not work on metaltalin. He's not doing meshich or agbanim on the sukkah. There's no kinyan. Everyone knows that a kinyan gezela has to have a kinyan. So Tosas matriach and macharish the whole idea of a domain, not domain, whose domain? Forget about it. Tosas say very simple. If Tosas was holding and talking, the man Yomer says, "Kol mechubra karka is metaltalin dami is not karka." So Tosas have a very simple difference between his case and the Gemara's case, or his case and the case of karka, because in Tosas' case, right, what happened? The sukkah is built on your own ground. So on your ground, and I walk onto it. I walk on the ground, steal the ground. I steal the sukkah. If sukkah is nigzelis, right? And the kinyan I'm making is kinyan chatzar. It's in my chatzar. So in Tos's case, you have a kinyan. But in the Gemara's case, or in the case of karka, there's no kinyan karka. How do you make kinyan karka? Right? There's no kinyan karka, which is metaltalin. That's what I meant to say, right? If it's metal, there's no kinyan, says the Kilos Yaakov. Right? He says right over here, both. Look at this. Balkopanim, right in the middle of the parah, Balkopanim on the Kilos Yaakov. She said, Tosas kan vade the mechubra karka. Midabiru the lodami will karka in exelis. See the brackets. Mishum the kind of gazlan. Vigatam the karka. The tosh of chibur metaltalin. But if tosh holds like metaltalin, You don't need this. Don't need this fancy thing of domain, not domain, or domain. You don't need that. There's no Mashiach. You didn't do any Mashiach in that sukkah. In the Gemara's case. So one case you have kinyan chasser, the other case has no kinyan. So of course you can't steal the karka in the Gemara's case. Right? If it's considered like metalton. It must be, since Tosas has to go through this whole chiddushtik halacha idea of domain and my domain, his domain, whatever, to make the difference between the two cases, it must be Tosas karka dummy. That's what he happens to be saying. He's not addressing my point. He just says that Tosas, holds is on the side of the Tanoim that Kamachubra Karka is a Karka. And therefore there's a havmina, you're making a kinyan, it's a kinyan chazaka, right? If the sukkah is equal to, if the sukkah if the sukkah in our case is equal to Karka, so you have kinyan chazaka. There's no problem with that. The only problem is you can't steal it, right? That's a different problem. I can't steal Karka. But so Tosha has to show that no, in one case you can steal karka, in one case you can't steal karka, it depends whose domain it is. But Hilchas Kinyan exists in both cases, a potential Kinyan in both cases, says the Kilos Yaakov. So my whole Paris also goes out the window. Even when the Man Yomer says Kamatalton, because Tosha cannot be talking that Man Yomer, says the Kilos Yaakov. Right? Stiple, it's a stiple, right? Right? The Helga Stipler, Chaim Kanievsky's father. Anyway, however, both sides, I can't for the life of myself figure out what he's talking about, because he even quoted the Magen Avraham. I don't know, it's very hard to read the Magen Avraham. He himself says, I'm sorry, it's Rabbi also talks a different Rabbi talks about Magen Avraham. It's very hard to read the Magen Avraham. But Chora, and I didn't put on the Marmon Thomas, there's another Rabbi which explains the Magen Avraham, and I think he says what I'm about to tell you, how I learned Pshat Magen Avraham. Magen Avraham clearly says, you read it inside. It's a big piece, but you don't have to read too much of it. By the brackets, you read that part over there. Igufa asks this kasha. Let's read the brackets. The kasha. Right, you see the kasha near the bottom of the paragraph of the Magen Avraham. The kasha. Even though it's not nixal. What about the asim? You can't steal karka, but you have a sukkah full of wood. So why don't you steal the wood? What do you can't steal karka? What about the wood? He says. Hold on, don't get so nervous. And therefore, he stole the wood. It's puzzle. They're looking, the Tzarach Chomer, the Mechubra Karka Dami. No, the wood you can't steal because that's Karka. Mechubra Karka is Karka Dami. Right? Like you said, like Rashi, that's what Rashi said. Rashi is really answering his kasha. The sukkah is not metalton, sukkah is Karka. Frag the Rana kasha, Magen Avraham kasha. The kasha. Goman the Yomer, B'chosha Mishpat, that's the Bahos Tanam I told you about, right? The man in Hoshana says the bias ravki mechubar karka. I mean, a house which is mechubar karka is not mechubar karka because it's tolosh or besof chibra, because you attached it. It's not a piece of ground is karka. A tree is mechubar karka. But somewhere it's tolosh and you built it and you attached it to the ground. That's not a karka. That's mahol tanam. So according to that man yomer, it's rav mechubar karka dami. It's not karka. So it's metaltalin. So he says, so what's going on? So why can't you go ahead and steal the metaltalin? It's not karka. Right? So he basically says they're both side. It's not true. Yesh Shomer. The next one, Yesh Shomer. He explains a little more on the next page also, in the next paragraph over here. Yesh Shomer. The last line of the big Magen Avraham. Kibbutz karka nixes bekes shtar chazaka. Since karka could be kona, the karka underneath the sukkah. That's you're right. Let's say the karka, the sukkah is metaltal. The sukkah is metaltal, and therefore, like, what are you doing with the metaltal? Right? I mean, you can be kona the metaltal, but how are you kona over here? He says, I could be kona the metaltal. You know why? Because I'm kona the ground underneath the metaltal, underneath the sukkah. I'm kona with kesef shtar chazaka. Right? Nikna bayis imo. The metaltal nikna agav karka. You ever hear the famous Kinyan Agav? Says the Magen Avraham. The Gemara makes a lot of sense. Because in terms of Kinyanim, there's no lack of Kinyanim over here. Remember, the Gemara's Sugya is Talion is Karka Nigzelis. In terms of is there a kinyan on the sukkah, there is kinyan on him, no matter what. If you hold kinyan mechubal karka kakudami, so it's kinyan chazak on the sukkah itself, no problem. If you hold mechubal karka is not a kakudami, it's like metaltlin. So you'll ask me what's going on. It says the Kilos Yaakov, there's no kinyan because you can't do mashiach, you can't do nothing. It doesn't work chazaka. No, because you have kinyan agav. Why? Because if you do a ma'isa gezela on the karka. If you do ma'aseh gzeila on the karka from the person, you're stealing his karka by going on him. If it wasn't for a karka not nixelis, that's a kinyan on the sukkah on top of it also, on the metalton on top of it. So metalton is not just nikta with mashicha or with hagbah, it's also with agav. Kinyan agav over here says Magen Avraham. Therefore, the Gemara makes sense. So Feish and Magen Avraham, I don't understand what the Kilos Yaakov is saying. I apologize. Maybe I'll work on another week or so. I'll figure it out. But Pashup Pshat, the Magen Avraham seems to be clearly saying, I think the Rabbi Kveger in Sukkah says the same thing on this about this Magen Avraham, that the kinyan which potentially we're discussing by this Sukkah, if on the side of this metalton is kinyan agav, because you do a kinyan agav means if you kona a piece of karka through legitimate ways of keshtar chazaka, in this case would be chazaka. You walk on the ground, you act like a baal, you're living in the chutzner, living on the ground. I'm acting like a baal. That's chazaka. So it's kinyan chazaka, so that's the kinyan on the karka. And if you've been kona something on karka, you can be kona with it. There's a kinyan being done on the metalton, which is stuck on top of it. And therefore, the Gemara is a very nice shaila. Maybe it's I stole the sukkah because I did a kinyan agav on it. Says the Gemara, no, that depends if karka nixelis. If karka is not nixelis, so that means the kinyan on the karka was not a kinyan, right? You can't steal karka. There's no kinyan on the karka, and therefore there's no kinyan on metalton either. So all boils down to the halacha: is there kinyan? Is karka nixelis or not? So if karka is nixelis, you have a kinyan on the karka, which is also kinyan on the metalton. If karka is not nixelis, there's no kinyan on the karka, no kinyan on metalton. So therefore, Tosis makes a lot of sense. Unlike, of the Kilos Yaakov, unlike Kilos Yaakov, Tosis could be talking about. Tosis can be talking about he can hold this metaltalin, and nevertheless, Tosis has to tell us that there's a difference, domain, not domain, because kinyan is not lacking over here, kinyan agav. So in the Gemara's case of kinyan agav, in Tosis' case of kinyan chaser, because it's all already yours, and Tosis is a machadish that in one case karka is not nixelis because it's not in your domain, and in Tosis' case it's nixelis because it is in your domain. So therefore, so just getting the cheshbon back in our both. Therefore, I could have answered the kash on the kash of the Gilad Shas by saying Tosis holds in metalton. The only problem I had before was that Lamaisa is the Manyomer says it's the karka. And therefore, the Gilad Shas kash would be if you hold the karka dami, the kash still remains. How come Eved, which hooks your karka, is compared to the wrong karka? The karka isn't exelis, right? Because a sukkah, which you could put into someone's domain, similar to an Eved, is exelis. So to an Eved should be an exel. So that we're back with the kash with the Gilad Shas on one Manyomer. Okay. Try to finish our both say. So I'll go a little bit over time. Now one more small kasha. I wouldn't say it's a bomb kasha, but maybe I think it's just doesn't reach our both say. You look at what is Tosis doing? If the way the Kilos Yaakov ever read Tosis is correct, right? Tosis is a machadish, right? That in the case of where Reuben built it on Shimon's land, right? He built it on Shimon's land. Then he threw Reuben out. So Tosis machadish. Well, that's considered in your domain, right? You stole the karka. It's on your karka. So what should Tosis try to distinguish between that case and what other case? What's the case which is the problem? The case, the closest case, the perfect parallel is the Gemara's case, right? The Gemara's case, which is almost exactly the same thing, right? You threw the guy out. The difference is whose karka is it on, right? Was it on Reuven's karka in the Gemara's case, or was it on Shimon's karka in Tosis' case? Tosis should say very simple. Over here is Shimon's karka. Over here is Reuven's karka. If you read Tosis carefully, both sides, he's not comparing it to the Gemara's case. Says, karka is not an exelis. What are you talking about? Karka is exelis. That's not the point over here. It's true. It's behind the scenes. That's true. But what Tosh should be saying is Tosh in the Gemara, where he threw him out of his chutzner, because in that case, the guy's sukkah is on the Nigzal's land, and therefore it's not your domain, it's Bechesed Bailam. Why is he trying to compare it to a case of Stam Karka Nixelis? That's what he should really be doing, is making Sushtel and show you why it's different than the case of the Gemara. The perfectly parallel case, except for one difference. Right? Okay, Karka is Karka, I can't steal Karka, fine. But if Tosha is saying that you can steal Karka, which is on Shimon's land, so why can't you steal Karka on Reuven's land? The same Sukkah tears the one's domain, one's not domain. That's what he should compare it to. He's comparing it to the wrong case, Tosha. A little mud, okay? I don't know. It's not a bomb cash, but I think it doesn't read so well. Okay, Rabbi, let's go. So I would like to, Rabbi, answer up Yunus Kash a whole different way. A whole different way, Rabbi. I think we all read Kils Yaakov and probably Yunus Shas. They all read Tosas wrong. Excuse my saying so. They all missed the boat on Tosas. Right? Let's clarify. So how do they read Tosas? How do they read Tosas until now? That Tosas is saying, what does it mean over here? The Ein Oleh Torah Shu'uba, because if it's on Shimon's land, it's not Shu'uba. Why? Even though Kaima B'Shus Ruvain, because the land, the Sukkah, is not on Ruvain's Rishus. Why? Because it's in Shimon's piece of land, right? Isn't that how you read it, right? Benny, am I correct, right? That's how the Kils Yaakov Peter read it. I think the Gon Shas reads it that way also. That in Tosha's case, the Sukkah is not on the Nigzal's land, rather it's on the Gazlan's land, on Shimon's land, right? Isn't that how you read Rabbi Flammel? Isn't that how you read Tosha's, right? That's how I read it. I'm not saying that's definitely Pashup Shad. I think there's a different way to read Tosha both. It changes everything. It changes everything on both sides. I think what Tosha is saying is a whole different svara and a whole different reading. What Tosha means is a sukkah. He's not saying the sukkah is not on the land of Reuven, rather on Shimon's land. He's saying the sukkah itself is not becheskes ba'alei ha'kaim. Metaltalin, such as a sukkah, right? Metaltalin is not like real estate. There's something unique about real estate. When the Gemara says, that's the next line, when the Gemara says a karka, so it has the name, is that you don't put in your pocket, it's just sitting there, and it's real estate, it's Chashav, Manhattan real estate, whatever, right? It's Becheshes Baleh, that's Greenberg's land, that's the land. You walk onto it, it doesn't change, unless you make a kinyan, whatever, and then it changes the title and everything, but it's something special about real estate. That's Beches Baleh. Karka is unique. Maybe because it's not movable, whatever the reason why it's there, it's sitting there, that's Greenberg's land, that's Feldman's field, that's Levine's, that's how it goes, Metaltalin is not like that, right? So it says Tosis that is Sukkah, and he's assuming Sukkah is Metaltalin, we'll get to that in a second on both sides. Sukkah is Metaltalin, and Sukkah, the whole Sfar which the Gemara was Machadish, which the Pasuk was taught us, and it's a Machadish that land can't be stolen. You know why? Because Bechesk Baler has a shame Baalam on it, and therefore you can never take it out of his domain, right? It's not out of by just walking on it. It's not out of, it's still in Feldman's name. That doesn't apply to a sukkah. A sukkah is, it's not real estate. Whatever, we'll see in a second. Assume it's metaltalin. If a sukkah is metaltalin, all metaltalin cannot be, it's not Becheskes Baler Omedes. Therefore, he compares it to the case of karka. The whole yesod, that's what he's trying to say. This case is unique. The whole idea of karka not being unique, so does not apply to metaltalin. Doesn't apply to a sukkah, because sukkah is metaltalin and sukkah is nixelis because of the fact that it's because there's shem malel. So therefore, so what does Tosas mean? So in the case of Tosas, since a sukkah you can steal, the only problem is, what about Hilchas Kinyan? Kinyan is never a problem because in Tosas' case, you have Kinyan Chatzar, right? In the Gemara's case, even though you can steal a sukkah, right? But since it's metaltalin, you can't steal it because where's the Kinyan, right? The only Kinyan we mentioned before, according to the Magen Avraham, is Kinyan Agav. That only applies if you can steal the karka. But if you can't steal the karka because karka is not exelis, so even though sukkah in its own right internally is considered an exelis because it's metaltalin, it's not shem melemes, but there's no kinyan. So again, everything revolves around this karka and exelis or not. But and even though sukkah is definitely an exelis per se, but you need a kinyan. So if karka is an exelis, so you have a kinyan because you have kinyan agab because you stole the karka. If karka is not an exelis, there's no kinyan, therefore you can't steal the sukkah, which is exelis, but you need a kinyan. That's what Tosas is saying. That's the Gemara. So So Tosfos is talking about sukkah which is metaltal. Right? Now, let me just, one more third both sides. Now you'll ask me, but we have the same kasha again, similar kasha. But L'maisa, many Tanaim hold that sukkah is kekarka. Right? Kasha asked before, those Tanaim which hold sukkah is kekarka. So Tosfos' alternate case where the pasuk is talking about where sukkah is not nixelis, or sukkah is the sukkah zur rather, would not be this case, because this case, according to many Tanaim, hold that it's kekarka. If it's kekarka, so remember, if the sukkah is kekarka, it is nixelis, because that's the halacha. The Torah says this is like karka, now, even though physically it's not, and therefore it should be nixelis, but it has halacha as if it's like karka, and therefore it's not nixelis. So Mela, so how do I find the case of sukkah gezula according to that man yomer? I didn't answer the kasha. I didn't answer Tosfos and Rashi trying to find a situation where the pasuk of sukkah gezula's puzzle applies. And according to me, Tosfos only found it in one man yomer, not in the other man yomer. There's Rabbah saying this will end with this. Rabbah is very simple. So you look at the bottom of the biroch on the bottom of the page. I'm sorry, the bottom of the base. He says that besides the case of agola, sukkah on top of an agola, on top of a sfina, there's also a different kind of case. You know what the case is? Where a guy went ahead, excuse me, and built the sukkah. He built the sukkah, and he didn't attach it to the ground. Right? Now, usually, if you go to someone else's piece of land, if I would ask Rabbi Palga, do me a favor, I'm your next door neighbor, I have no backyard, you have a big backyard, let me go into your land and build a sukkah for 8 days. Am I going to dig into the ground and put cement foundations and attach to the ground? No, I'm going to put a sukkah like most people do. You do it probably in your own land also a lot of times, right? You don't necessarily, okay, in Miami, there's winds, I don't know, but you put a sukkah, you build a sukkah, you take the metal, the wooden 2x4s, or the metal pipes, whatever, you build it, you put it on top of the ground. So it's not going anyplace, right? So it's nowhere not attached. The whole shiloh of that Tanaim is if it's attached to the ground. You build a house, or maybe you anchored and put cement, the foundation by sukkah. I don't know about that, right? But a normal case of sukkah, which is what Tosfos is talking about, especially, I'm not sure about all cases, but especially if you build it on the ground, it's not a mechubal karka. That kuyamo ping is metal. That's not a shiloh. That's what Tosfos is talking about. Tosfos is not talking about a case of mechubal karka. It's not mechubal karka. And that kuyamo ping is metalton. So again, on both sides. So therefore, Tosfos is saying, Tosfos Yesod is that metalton and sukkah, a sukkah is metalton, there's no such thing as b'shem ba'al medes. Therefore, sukkah is always stolen. A sukkah is always stolen. What about avodim? Now, avodim is very similar to sukkah, right? Because you can put an evan in someone's property, and you can put a sukkah in someone's metalton, in someone's property. But there's a big difference, because avodim is hilchos karkos, avodim is hilchos karka. So a sukkah, which is metalton, at least the one that's metalton, which tells about all non-attachable ones, those are all metalton. There's no shaykhis to b'shem balames on metalton. But anything which is kekarka dummy, right? So the halacha is that if it's kekarka, that means that's hilchos karka. Hilchos karka means that even though you might say it's not real estate, but the Torah looks as if it's real estate, and therefore it's shem malel menes. You can't steal it. You can't steal it, and therefore the halacha is that one of the bukshul karkos, even though you can put evan in the guy's karka, but so what? It's b'shem malel menes. You put it on the domain of the owner, which was the old Svar. That Svar doesn't exist. That's a facade. They're both right. Which Rabbi Kveger, the Kibbutz Yaakov thought Tosfos saying is not saying that. The fact that you take a karka, right? Something which is considered karka, and put it on my karka, that does not put in my domain. There's still his domain is on top of mine. It's not in my domain. That Svar does not exist. That Tosfos never said that Svar. So Mela, the Shah says no kasha, right? Because avodim is hilchos karka. There's not one case in the world of karka which is stealable, right? Because when a sukkah is stealable, that's because we're talking about a sukkah which is metalton. And a sukkah which is mechubal karka, if it's attached and you consider that karka, that's not stealable. The only stealable sukkahs are those that are metalton, either the ones that are put on top of the ground, like the birlach, or the ones that are attached on the side that you hold, called mechubal karka, metalton dami. those sukkahs are stealable. But the Eved is Hukshul Karka. So Mela, if it's Hukshul Karka, comes out, Avadim are not stealable, because halacha by karka is never stealable, because it's Shem Malel Medes, Avadim, which in theory you might say might not have that chashivas of real estate, but Torah says, karka done it, that's halacha of karka, and therefore you can't steal it. And there's no other case. The only kash of Gilon Shas is because there's a category of karka which is stealable. You put on domain, but that's not true anymore. That doesn't exist. That svara. All karka is not stealable. There's Eretz Hukshul Karka. It's not stealable, and therefore you're not chai b'chayis. My Rabbi said, thank you.